Beers and Banter, episode 36. We've got a special guest in the house tonight. He's a two-time Olympian, three-time Noosa Triathlon winner, multiple-time Australian Triathlete of the Year, Ironman race winner, and Red Bull athlete, Courtney Atkinson. Let's rip in. Courtney Atkinson, welcome to Beers and Banter.
Thanks for having us.
And as is customary to kick off Beers and Banter, we need a beer.
Bloody oath, we need a beer.
So I got some Goldies on request. Forex Gold.
You had a jump start by the looks of it. Got one for Dana over there too.
I do. There you go. We are social distancing today, so I'm pretty sure there's 1.5 meters between us.
Not impartial to the old gold either.
We got Dane Murray in the background. I haven't mic'd him up tonight because he's a bit too chirpy. But actually, would you believe this? I had a bloke tell me last week that Dane Murray was the most underrated cyclist on the Gold Coast.
He taught me everything I know.
Thanks for joining us. It's first one back. I'm a little bit rusty, actually, so bear with me. Really enjoyed sort of looking back over your career in the lead up to this, but how have you been going over the last couple of months? It doesn't seem like you're the kind of bloke that sits still for very long.
Yeah, no, I mean, I consider myself pretty fortunate over the last few months. It's been, quite busy. I mean, obviously outdoors has been a lot harder to get out, but, We're lucky here in Queensland. We've been able to get out. Still, obviously exercise has been one of the few things we can do. So, when your job, I suppose, and everything I do still revolves around being an athlete, being able to get out there every day is a good start.
I've never seen so many people on the beach at this time of year.
Hey, you want to see the forest? Man, I'd like to own a bike shop at the moment.
Bikes went through the roof. You can't buy weights anywhere. What else was there's a whole heap of things that are actually booming at the moment.
100%. Oh, it's good for society, right? Everything from such an awful situation for so many people. One good thing's come out of it is the fact that you're seeing a lot more people out there exercising. So hopefully it continues.
I hope there are some silver linings. Like there's some countries that are really doing it tough at the moment, and they got a long way back. But you would hope that the planet has looked at what's going on and gone, geez, there are some things that we take out. When we do relax a little bit, the planet breathes, and wildlife seems to come back to certain areas. I read an article today. It talked about basically a lot of cities are going to fast track bicycle lanes and pedestrian lanes because they're noticing that there's actually not enough room on the pavement if everyone decides to walk everywhere. So that could be an interesting change in some of the metro areas to see less cars and more bikes and pedestrians.
100%. I mean, the first thing is you can see the Himalayas now from some cities, which is just goes to show how much what we're doing to the world, right? But, it's obviously there was a bit of a reset and people jumped on the bandwagon of exercise. But if, I suppose 60% of them continue along that lines, I think it's going to be good for society, right? And good for our health system and everything else. Let's hope more people start riding and running.
Do you think the inside gym might struggle after this?
No, I think there's going to be still, you'll get your core people who love going to the gym, and once the offices get back to a bit of normality, that suits some people's lives. But I reckon there's a percentage to also realise, if you go for a walk in the bush or in a rainforest or up in the hills, it's a pretty nice thing, and it's an alternative to just pumping out the iron.
It's good for your mental health as well. Just getting outside. Of a bit of bro science, I've heard a lot of stuff that they reckon vitamin D is really good for this thing, that people that are vitamin D deficient have really struggled harder than most with the COVID-19 thing. So could be a part of the reason why Australia went so well during it, or maybe it's just good management. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
No facts here, just it's speculation.
It's not really science. Hey, you go out in the morning, or if you're in the surf, in the sun, or whatever, you feel good. And I think a lot of people there's a lot of talk around health and mental health these days, and the reality is, if you put yourself outdoors more often than not, you're on probably pretty good track to feeling pretty good.
I found it interesting that they're worried about surfers, and I was thinking that is the last place that you're gonna swap germs out there. Like you're very rarely hugging or high-fiving in the surf, and you got covered in salt water and sun, and I didn't see it.
Yeah, but I mean, on the flip side of all that, right, it comes back to you've got to have majority of the people, toeing the line, doing the right thing. And, in the end, we've come out of this amazing so far.
Far.
We're not right through it, but we've come out amazing compared to what could have happened.
Yeah.
So it's easy in hindsight to look back and think, why did we do that? Or, we could have been out doing, we couldn't have stopped. We could have not stopped as much as what we did, but then on the flip side, if we went, the other way, we'd be sitting there having a different conversation.
It's hard, and that's why my opinion on the whole thing flip-flops every day. I go, geez, this was unnecessary, and then I go, oh, geez, I'm glad that was that way. When you start to look at some of the other countries and what they're dealing with at the moment. But do you get any time for just some couch time? There's lots of documentaries and plenty of TV shows out there at the moment.
Oh, bloody oath, yeah. I'm not impartial to Netflix, like everyone, but I suppose when it comes to TV and whether it's gaming or whatever it is, for me, that's a little bit like my meditation as well.
Yeah.
So people want to chill out, completely zone out. Well, I suppose when you're out running and spending, a fair bit of your time outdoors, to me, you're doing a lot of thinking and you're out there on your own or, I suppose isolating or you're out in nature, all those types of things. And to me, that's mental health for me.
Yeah.
That's why I go out and, I probably enjoy running a little bit is you get out and you can kind of just think or you can kind of zone out and not think at all. And then on the flip side, when I watch something like Netflix, you don't think at all. You just... That's in a way as bad as it is to say a bit of meditation.
Did you see the big one that everyone's talking about, The Last Dance? Have you watched that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Crazy, and one of the biggest documentaries of all time, I would say. So much hype. Weird that the Luke Longley has basically stayed right out of the limelight there. It seems by choice, but they tried to say that was a budget issue. I'm thinking they can have Steve Kerr's mum on the thing. That there's got to be bandwidth for the starting center of the Chicago Bulls. But I've watched them all. I signed up for a free Amazon Prime just for 30 days just to watch a movie, and then realised that the Test, that's a really good one. Starts with Justin Langer as he takes over his tenure as Australian coach, and he's softly for the first couple of weeks, and then just starts ripping in because they just keep falling over. The batting lineup just keeps falling over. That and the Kelly Slater one was really good. Momentum Generation. Have you seen that?
I've seen Momentum Generation. I can't say I've seen the cricket. Have you seen the cricket?
No, I haven't seen the Slater one either.
But yeah, I mean the one that kicked them all off really was the F1.
Yeah,
the first Netflix version, like
Drive to Survive.
Yeah, Drive to Survive. The first version was that's really what's reinvented.
Yeah,
behind the scenes, professional sports, Netflix television, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
and that I reckon, the rest are just following. They're trying to copy what they did because the audiences, of that one Netflix show, literally doubled.
It was funny. The drivers would say things thinking that it'd mean that they'd cut it out. Like some of the things Ricardo said to the camera, thinking that that'll just end up on the cutting room floor, and they played it. It was some of the behind the scenes stuff where they clearly they'd forgotten that they were mic'd up. Like they'd disappear into a room, but they were obviously still wearing the camera crew's mics, and it's some of it's great. Like drivers carrying on, and it's all the stuff you want to see on the coverage that. Obviously, it just disappears behind a closed door, and you've got to assume what happens next. But yeah, that was really good. Yeah,
I was gobsmacked because I just couldn't believe what they were showing, like the access they had to, Well, you've never seen it before.
Hey, Dane, pull the mic over.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's
Hear
good.
you loud and clear now,
Perfect.
mate.
Yeah.
I was going to say the F1's pretty much real hush-hush, isn't it? Like the teams and the technology and everything. So it's
Yeah, but they showed. Technology is one thing, but just what the access they had to the people and what they were actually showing and behind the scenes. I just never thought a sport like that would ever come out.
How some of the team bosses speak to their people is absolutely phenomenal.
really, I'll have to watch that one. I've got plenty of time on the couch.
Oh,
so.
mate, you're missing it. That one, that's
Drive
that
to
one's gold,
Survive. Check it out.
If I had one to watch, that would be it. Obviously, The Last Dance it's more interest because I think it's appealing to everyone. your wife at home can watch it and still have interest in it, even if they don't, not super into sport. Whereas, F1, I think you've got to probably have a bit of both, be into sport and also kind of be just interested in, what was it? Craziness, really.
How much pressure was on some of those young guys, and you can just see it building and building in. I think it was Gasly when he was in the number 2 seat at Red Bull and just really, really struggling with how much pressure. Max is at the top of the field and he's just struggling below teams that he should be in front of. Then they punted him to the number 2 team and he actually started going better. So it's just really interesting, all that behind the scenes stuff and how they speak to him. And it's like they probably earn their bucks, those guys, to a degree.
100% earn their bucks. And then also, if you think even just 5 years ago, sport's just been flipped on its head. You'd never see the behind the scenes stuff or the personal stuff that people are showing these days. And, I think you find different sports people have, look at it differently of what they want to show. But, I didn't think, I suppose, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that I'd ever see the day where you were, seeing into the living room of Ronaldo or someone doing exercises on their home floor and seeing, just their family life and that. It's like really interesting to see the way, I suppose, technology now and social media and TV is shaping sport for the future.
The Americans have done it. They've had a fairly invasive media for a long time. So you look at that Last Dance and you look at Michael Jordan post game, just can't even walk for microphones and cameras. And then you've got current day like Australian athletes like not wanting to talk to the media. And it's like, do you not? That's the hand that feeds you.
Exactly.
Is all those people. But it's crazy, and this time has even taken us right inside some of these people's homes. I want you to take us back to your early days in the Gold Coast. You're a Queenslander, born in Mackay, but obviously come to the coast at fairly young.
Correct. Yeah. No, I went quickly to Brizzy, but been at the coast all my life. Just down the road here at Miami Primary, and then went off to TSS after that up at Southport, but always been around this area.
Proper local.
Proper local.
Take us back to your nipper days. Pretty handy nipper.
Yeah, so I started at Surfers Paradise Surf Club, and there was guys like I was racing with, I suppose, Grant Hackett. There was another fella, Chris Wood, who's now he's teacher at Merrimack, isn't he? Dane. Yeah.
Assistant principal, I think.
Since assistant principal, yep.
Lives down the road, actually.
Who else? Dave Rastovich was one of the guys.
Surfer?
The surfer. Dave Rastovich was one of the guys in our team. So I think, there's some photos hanging around Surfers Club that, have all of us in that team, which is like pretty unique, I suppose, the fact where we ended up in life after that. Completely different areas in sport, but all started back there at Surfers Surf Club. And then I moved to North Burleigh.
Yeah.
And that's where really, I suppose, the bulk of my mates and, really had the best young days or young days of my life, right?
Why did you join? Why did you come? Because
I don't actually know how to answer that. I actually don't know why I came. You'll find out really quickly on a podcast like this. I have the worst recollection of everything just melts into one of it. Like sometimes, like there was actually.
To be fair, it's a fair while.
But I just can't.
Did I know you? Did I know you before then?
I doubt it.
No.
Yeah, but I mean, we were.
It's probably
13.
closer to home.
This is going more like 12, 13.
It was the first year. You were a first year cadet on the males. You finished nippers at Surface.
I reckon it must have come after nippers. Yeah,
I'm sure you did. And I was cadet second year, and you were first year cadet.
So
I don't remember if I knew you before that. But who did you know in the club then? Trent Ryan's age group, all those guys, wasn't it?
Shane Williams.
I
I suppose
Surface
I
was
would have raced them as a nipper.
Mm.
So I would have known all the guys. I would have raced, like Timmy Walker and everyone I knew as a
That's
nipper.
right. Yeah,
So we were like...
TSSs
but that was prior to TSS. So if you think about it, we used to go and travel for those Queensland and New South Wales teams and that. So we'd race each other, kind of be on those teams together in nippers. And then... but anyway, long story short, probably some of the best days of my life down at Burleigh.
Yeah.
North Burleigh, yeah.
So at Surface, you would have had Trevor Hendy to look up to, come down to North Burleigh. It was potentially Scotty Reeves was probably in the top game at that point or about to make it.
Yeah, no, Reeves was at the end. Yeah, the tail end.
Yeah, not the start. The start when you would have been there would have been...
So as you're hitting your peak, surf life savings in probably its golden era, and triathlon, and they both sports dominate like your your weekend viewing. For a kid like me, it definitely was. Triathlon had Brad Bevan and Miles Stewart and just household names at the time. Lifesaving had Hendy, Guy Andrews, Dwayne Tyers, all those guys. What made you go from surf lifesaving, where you said you're having such a great time, but you've gone towards the triathlon? What happened there?
The Southport School, TSS, happened.
Yep.
So I went up to TSS at the beginning of high school and had no idea I could run. So up to that stage, like all through my young days at Miami Primary, I was an all right endurance athlete, but I was a swimmer. So when I'd go and run the 800s or the cross country, I wouldn't do too bad, but I was definitely not winning them. I can remember doing 800s over here at Pissy Park and being like, half the field back from the guys winning in the grade. But for some reason, when I arrived at TSS, we went off on a school camp up the back at Canungra.
Yep.
And as part of going to school there, we used to do Army Cadets, compulsory. So I think that first year we went on camp, literally in the first or second week of school, we had to run every morning this loop in our cadet boots. First morning we did it, training. And then the final morning of that week, there was a race. And literally you won this like perpetual trophy of an old like army boot on a stump, which had been passed down over years and years at the school. And I won it. I don't know why, I don't know how. It just like, I was so fit, I reckon, from years and years of swimming, that it got me through the distance. And from literally that day on, I was a runner.
Yeah, right.
So then I went through really quickly to like national level, so racing. Guys who then went on, I suppose, to race Olympic Games in our marathoning, in our marathon teams.
Yep.
I'd race them at national level. And then while I was at high school, there was a guy named Greg Redan who was, I think, the highest place triathlete at the Hawaii Ironman. He was a teacher at the school, kind of put two and two together that I could swim and run all right, put me on a bike. And I remember I used to go around in winter like in tracky pants when I was first on the bike. And mate, by the time I left high school, even before I left high school, I was already, ripped off overseas racing triathlon. So it wasn't so much that I made the choice.
Yeah.
It was just all opportunity.
Because something me and my mates like to do is, I was never any good at the surf club. I arrived there late. I'd played footy, was half decent across the sand, so I was a bit of a beachy. Like, by the time I'd arrived in surf lifesaving, I was too slow in the water to be any good. But I do love the sport, and I think it's got to be the most Australian sport there is. AFL might argue with it, but I don't know. On the beach, summers on the beach is just, to me, is the most Australian thing you can do. But I wonder where did surf lifesaving start to nosedive, and triathlon still, it's a global sport. I understand that side of it, but in Australia, surf lifesaving just really struggles for any sort of attention nowadays.
Yeah, I don't think it will matter what I say. I'm going to probably put myself in the shit here some way or another. At the Olympics, yeah.
That's what I remember. The Toby's before 2000. That's when triathlon
2000.
was first in the Olympics.
2000, yeah.
Yeah. So that went Olympic sport. They got all the funding, all the attention, and Uncle Toby's pulled the pin.
I guess it's a money aspect too. Like you Australians, and I think it's really Australian, but people that live more than 10 k's from the beach doesn't even register for them. Whereas triathlon, something you can do in any town, any place in the world.
I think that's what I was going to say. The bigger problem for surf lifesaving, I suppose, was that it wasn't global.
There was always that Nutrigrain ad with the dude had the wheels on his paddleboard. Do you remember that? That's not real.
Country somewhere.
No.
But globalization,
Yeah.
Triathlon and surf lifesaving, when they coexisted here in Australia, you didn't have there wasn't that ease of international travel. Even there wasn't international sport. That was all that existed. And you could only really watch what was on TV and put in front of you. So that's what on a Sunday, you were given triathlon to watch, or Ironman, or cricket, or whatever it was.
We used to follow each other too, sometimes on the same channel.
Well, we
they're
actually
in the same event.
we joined
Yeah,
at one
yeah.
for 1 year. We joined together, so
Yeah,
we'd
right.
literally race at the same beach, and
Yeah.
they were like amazing days. And like it was the way it was around like an Australian sport. I think that we'll never have that again with globalization. But to answer your question, two things: the Olympics happened,
Yep.
and the fact that triathlon just was a global sport. I mean, it was being raced all across the world. It was strong in America, Hawaii. I mean, even the Hawaii Ironman, outside of Australia, Ironman is actually triathlon.
Yep.
But that had nothing to do, I suppose, with where I was going. I started off purely just wanting to race. Like, I wanted to be like Trevor and those guys in Ironman, but my chosen sport was triathlon. So I spent pretty much my first maybe 8 years, all I wanted to do, all I cared about was trying to win the races that were on TV.
Yep.
And that's how we made our income. So like straight out of school, I spent the rest of those 8 to 10 years racing as a profession, and then the Olympics happened, and then after that it just we spent most of our life overseas, I suppose.
So you sort of got from memory, and I'm trying to think back. You're one of those sort of never say die. It was sort of like you always were just waiting for you to come from the clouds to win a race at times. Is that wrong or no?
No, I think that's pretty wrong.
No good.
I go down pretty easy, I reckon.
No, I reckon
your big one was the first one you beat Bevan at Southport, wasn't it? Where you just pipped him. Southport, Broadwater car
which is
park.
maybe what I'm thinking
even that,
of.
when you look back at it, I reckon there was a bit of a dodgy arm in there, maybe. We're racing pretty close back in those days.
You're being modest.
Yeah.
Because I think you're still at school then, mate. I think you're still in grade 12.
I think I was 17.
And
yeah,
Bevan
grade 12.
was the man, and you pipped him at the dead set.
But what people don't realize, you talk about more how things happen, and it all sounds, like you said, easy now, and you just like kind of laugh over it and glaze over it. But the story, I used to literally get up so we used to swim down here at Miami Pool with Dennis Cottrell, and we'd be in the water at 5:30.
Would have been a fair squad back then too.
Yep. And I used to get up prior to going swimming, ride my bike from Mermaid Waters here up to the Southport car park, because I knew there'd be no cars in there in the dark with lights on, and literally just ride laps of the course we were going to race.
Yeah.
Like for 40 minutes. Because, and I think now if I had a kid, well, I do have kids, would you let them ride up at 4:30, leave home at 4:30 in the morning in the dark into the Southport car park, which used to be the car park, it's now probably the swimming pool. And I used to ride laps there with a headlamp on my own in the dark, and then make it back down to Miami swim pool, jump in the water at 5:30. And when people go, you won your first race, and they think, it's all easy and that, I used to ride down there, twice a week and just lap around this 400-meter course. So I knew that I would be better in the corner than anyone else.
So what I'm trying to work out is, because I don't have that mindset, I was a sprinter. I was good for 100 and then was gone. No endurance. As soon as I was cooked. Same as footy, good for a couple of hit-ups. Then I'll be looking at the bench I'm good to go. Swap me out. Where does that gritty, never give up, endurance mindset come from? Are you born with it or is it made?
I think it's definitely you have genetics for it, but then it's also trainable.
From memory, it was you had a pretty handy family. Like your brother and sister were pretty good at sport too.
Oh yeah, we're all okay, but I think it's very to get endurance sport. You can train, right? 100%. Look at Dane started riding. What age did you start riding your bike?
20s.
Early 20s,
early
20s, maybe mid 20s.
Seriously.
When we first went, because we were mates, we first started riding bikes, and Dane helped me train for a lot of my later Olympic stuff and that, and was my main training partner.
Yeah.
But just purely from going out and just riding, you just got better and better and better over time to the point where he probably would outride me when he got so serious on the bike that he'd keep going. But that's just that's complete train. He had talent as a surf lifesaver surfer, all that, and then was able to.
Bit of a stretch.
But he could. But it's trainable up to that, to a really high standard in endurance. I think when you talk about then switching over to that Olympic level,
Yeah.
you probably, for me, it was probably more talent, and then I just trained on top of it.
Going to tell you a weird story, and it's probably going to sound it's going to sound weird. I played footy with your brother Rick, and something we're talking like 25 odd years ago, and there's something that he said one day that has stuck with me, and I didn't know whether it was an upbringing thing or whether it was just like, when kids you're all spitting like at footy, it's like, you sort of getting a bit tired and you start spitting, and he just sort of piped up one, because I think my old man must have clipped me around the ear or something, and he sort of piped up and said, if you've got spit left in your mouth, you've still got something left in the tank. And it's going to be the sound so weird, like why would you remember that 25 years later? But
dry.
That's and I didn't know whether that was something that he'd got from your dad or from your family, or it was just. I just remember him having like a motor, like 2 hit ups and I'm done. Rick would play all day and then go and do another sport after that. Like I did. That's all.
He'd like to hear that. Maybe you tell him.
What a badass.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a weird memory to have as like a 10-year-old kid, but yeah, it was just something that stuck with me. Like
I can't answer you. A lot of these questions aren't.
What did your mum and dad do? What, were they athletic?
Not really. No, not that. I mean, back then, unless you were like,
swimming.
Yeah, probably. But to answer your question, like, there's not easy.
It's enough creepy stalker stories.
Yeah, and there's not easy answers to your question, because the when it comes to sport, I mean, a lot of it is just like once you're in the zone or once you're doing something, you don't actually think about it too much.
Yeah, I've never had that problem.
The zone, what's that?
And I think some people are born with it and some people aren't. Because
if you want to put it in a different perspective, I think with endurance, like if you can go out and you actually start enjoying, like when it gets uncomfortable, and you actually get into that area of like, this is not. I'm not going super hard, but I'm not going super easy.
Yeah.
And then you start to enjoy that area, then you probably know you're ready for endurance sports. Because
it's a corporate buzzword now.
What's
being comfortably uncomfortable.
I reckon I trademarked that about 10 years ago. That was up Springbrook every day. Hey, I say, you don't want to go? If you can ride the whole thing uncomfortable,
sweet spot.
Just before you start to like go, and like there's a lot. I suppose later in the later years of me racing, there was a lot of technology that come into the sport, but I always like to still go by feel. So these days I have all the GPS stuff, and not that I ride a heap these days, but power meters and all that type of thing. But I still would prefer just to listen. There's something about just listening to your body and knowing where you're at, and then knowing how far you can push yourself to kind of just before you fall off the edge. And I reckon when you get home from doing something like that, at the time you feel absolutely gobsmacked, but when you get home, that's when you feel the best.
Yeah.
Body's completely awake, and
Next question. Is the Gold Coast the sporting capital of Australia?
Yes. Yeah.
I like it. I like that answer.
100%. It's changed. I mean, going back 20 years ago in individual sport, it was probably one of the only places to be. There's been a few different, I suppose, towns, cities that have, I know in endurance sport, like places like Noosa, people Gold Coast got a bit busy and a few moved away. The internationals who all used to come to the Gold Coast, they went off to, maybe quieter places. But for me, as far as terrain goes, for endurance sports and a lot of sports because of climate as well, you can't beat the Gold Coast. And if you actually went through, and we're talking pure individual sports here now, but if you actually went through, drivers, motocross, triathlon, swimming, whatever, running, think of guys like Michael Shelley, all that, like even runners that have come, recently.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people on the Gold Coast.
And it's the argument I have that I'm campaigning to have Gold Coast recognised as the sporting capital of Australia, because everyone's quick to dismiss the Gold Coast as never be successful with some of our sporting teams as far as on-field performance, and we just need to shift them and they'll do well. And it's like, it's got nothing to do with this is the best location in Australia to succeed.
Who are you versing?
Well, all the Sydney teams that are good for nothing, but I don't know. It's just an argument I always have that the location is not an excuse for not succeeding in a team sport.
Yeah, I mean, team sports are going to be different, but I don't think you can get too big an argument that Gold Coast wouldn't have produced, majority a big hand in a lot of Australia's individual sports
some
stars.
Some of our greatest swimmers, greatest triathletes.
Adam Scott, golf.
True.
You know, even if you go down to like, I think of just like when I'm thinking even just school, you know, you're thinking Adam Scott, you've got, just lost his name, Chris Atkinson. You know, literally one of our only world rally car drivers,
surfers. Obviously, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, surfers all have come down from down Cooley here. It's endless. All like I think rugby. You know, Matty Rogers.
Yep.
Lost for words now. I've kind of forgotten them all.
That's all right. You mentioned one.
Of them.
You mentioned one.
Nathan Sharp.
Yeah,
you know,
lots of footy players.
Kenny Wallace.
Kenny Wallace. I spoke to him today. Actually, gave him a call, and you know, these are all. Oh, Kai Hurst was doing a lot of his training. Like one of, I think, London Olympics. Like if you think about memories I've had, and Gold Coast memories. So with triathlon, when we go to the games, we generally wouldn't go to the opening ceremony because being an endurance sport, you know, you don't want to waste energy and would always be training off location, not wherever the games were. But for London, it was like I was thinking, you know, I was in France at the time, only like an hour flight away, and I'm like, I'm going no matter what. So I flew into the village the night before, and literally they gave me a room with just Kai and Kenny. So two of them, and Cole Braun, Scotsman, who used to be at North Burleigh, who was Kai's swim coach and hung around North Burleigh heaps, him as well. So literally the four of us went out and marched in the opening ceremony together and got to stay in the village that night together. You know, and that's Australians and Olympic Games in London for Gold Coasters that we just used to, you know, knock around as kids and hang out. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of my other favourite places on the planet, Noosa, before. You're a multiple-time winner there. But looking through some of your stats, is that the kids in the background there?
Probably my mob.
You've won and placed
across the street.
You've won and placed at some of the biggest triathlons around the world. But when I was looking through your stats today, the one that piqued my interest the most was the escape from Alcatraz. I'm going to read you a quote. It's pretty rough, but coldest winter ever was a summer in San Francisco. I don't know if it's a Mark Twain quote or something like that, but that joint was free. The time I visited, it was absolutely freezing. What was that race like?
Hey, the water's cold. I don't think it was too bad the year. So it was one of those bucket list races I always want to do. There's certain races around the globe that weren't, you know, world championship races, World Cups and all that. It was these, like, in triathlon you have these, I suppose, destination events. And it was definitely one I'd always wanted to do. Never got to it. Finally, one year went. Water was about 11 degrees. The thing is, you go out in a boat. So when they say escape from Alcatraz, you literally are escaping from Alcatraz. So they take you out on a ferry. The race is limited to, I think, 2,000 people maybe. And 100 metres off the side of Alcatraz, you jump off the side of the ship and just swim back to shore. So there's no buoys. There's no siding markers. You're literally just, 2 miles straight back across the thing. The one, and people probably, if anyone who knows me, I've told this story over and over again, but I'll tell it one more time. The thing is, obviously, the harbour's pretty well known for great whites, right? It's not through that area, and that was always like my thought process of swimming there in a black weddy like a seal.
Because the seals are all. Have you been there, Dane?
No.
So you go to one of the piers just there, and you can smell the seals before you see them or hear them. They're everywhere. So
they're everywhere. So you literally, you're dressed you're a seal.
Yeah.
It's literally escape from Alcatraz as a seal. Swim 2 mile across the open water back to the beach. So
it's fair current too.
Yeah, breaks. I mean, as far as safety goes, I don't think they'd be running it here in Australia. They like kind of split open this field like across with the currents. 2 miles is a fair. I think 2 miles. What's that?
That's 4.2. 3.2. Sorry.
3.2. No, don't quote me on the distance, but it's a longer swim than an Olympic distance anyway. And pretty much, we got through the race. It was all fine. The next year, I was watching YouTube, and they told us the sharks were like, no issue because of the water temperature at that time, or blah blah blah, blah bull crap.
Yep.
Next to that ferry that goes out to Alcatraz, this massive great white takes a seal out of the water next to the ferry while they're all like on iPhones filming it. Takes it out of the water, dumps it,
What, before the race, or just
no, just like
when
you
the
just like
tourists on there?
6 months later or whatever after the race. That's like where we've just jumped in the water in wetsuits. I was like, far out, lucky I've got that done,
That's
dusted,
horrendous.
go
and
back.
move on. And did all right.
How's the beers? Everyone right?
Yeah, I'm good, man.
I'm empty.
Well, if Dane's having another one, I'll have another one. I've got to drive home though.
Yeah, I got a big walk. Cheers. Did you win that? Did you win that one?
Nah, I got second.
Who won?
Second.
I do remember watching it.
American. No.
American. And
No.
Potts?
Potts.
Yeah, that's right.
Andy Potts. So probably one of the, if you went the 3 bucket list race or 3 bucket list races I've done would be Alcatraz.
Yep.
Coast to coast in New Zealand. So an adventure race across New Zealand. That Dane come to.
Yeah, I did that one.
Dane come and handled for me on that day. Literally, you can
was a
tell
big
you can tell
day,
the
long
story
day.
of how what you. So the long day, but for us in a boat. So there's a 70-kilometre kayak paddle, whitewater downriver kayak, and it took me 5 hours. Anyway, Dane had to drag me out of the boat.
Yeah, literally. Pulling me out of it.
Well, yeah.
And then you got to ride 70k back into Christchurch after that, and literally, your legs are so gone. Your handlers, so in this case it was Dane and one of the other
Just
fellas.
numb from sitting there for 5 hours.
5 hours in a sitting on a like a carbon fibre seat in a
Yep.
kayak or fiberglass seat. It was awful, but the terrain and the scenery, as far as the race
Awesome,
goes, you just
yeah.
never get it. And the fact it's like historic that you cross New Zealand in a day.
Are you Australia's Forrest Gump?
No.
You've seemed to really transition out of that. Was obviously not, but running.
No. People ask this all. Like it's a really good question because people ask it all the time, and the difference, because so many and a lot of the time for great causes too, but so many
Yep.
people doing these extreme endurance feats like riding across the Nullarbor or running
Yep.
from the length of New Zealand or whatever it is, and
Didn't that fella just run a marathon a day for
Yeah.
a month or something? on the
marathon a
coast here?
day, it just doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty brutal about it. Because like I've come from a racing background.
Yeah.
So everything I do, I still need to have some form of element that it's like, the damn set just so hard. Not hard because you're going to be out there for 40 days, but hard because, this hill to get up it is, a challenge.
Yeah.
And always wanting to do it hard, or just completely the opposite of I'm doing this because it's just such nice scenery. I'm going to take my time and enjoy
Yep.
it and film it or whatever it is. And we do a lot of that these days too around filming for tourism, but they're two completely separate things. I either want to enjoy it or I'm like in a race situation or doing something for the sake of doing hard. This
Yep.
whole idea of just doing stuff really, I'm not Forrest Gump.
Fair enough. What was your third? You gave us. You gave us Alcatraz, coast to coast. What was the third you're going to give us?
I just said 3 for the sake of it because I was thinking of 2. But what would be a third one? The other big triathlon I suppose I did was London Triathlon, which goes around up to Big Ben.
Which you won that?
Yeah, won London a few times, but it's kind of historic in the sense of the course, but it's not really that interesting. What would be interesting?
Did you do Kona at all?
No, never did Kona.
What was the one you did in
You know what I?
Thailand? How part of the swim was open water, then you had to swim
Oh, that's
across
right.
that
Yeah, that was at
lagoon
we did
area.
one in Phuket where you swam. The first half of the swim was in the ocean.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Got out. You got out, swam across a lagoon. So if you imagine you're in salt water, so it's like quite buoyant and holding you up. You run across this little island, dump in the fresh water. You feel like someone's throwing a ton of bricks on your back. They're always hard races. But no, if you think about get off triathlon about interesting races, the other interesting one I did was the Larapinta Trail, which is a multi-stage run race out around Alice Springs.
Yeah, right.
And Alice Springs is the one place no one expects there to be like running and bike. Some of the best mountain bike trails in Australia are literally at the doorstep of Alice Springs.
Wow.
And then you got the Larapinta Trail. So it was a 4-day race. You're camping out overnight and, you just get to see them like the scenery you get to see, and that's what interests me these days. It's spectacular.
The adventure.
The adventure, yeah.
Yep.
Because that's why, I mean, if you look at, probably ask me why I got into triathlon versus running, or why even Ironman probably interests me more than becoming, like, sticking with swimming, is, single sports, I think, not so much they get bored. You can still have an element of, like, getting somewhere or doing something for that purpose. But, multi-sport in whichever way it is always providing something new. And then you add, I suppose, off-road multi-sport or an off-road element to that, and then you're providing all these new elements. It's like, that's what keeps me interesting. And I can do that all day, but then if you went and said, go and do an Ironman, mate, I'll be running the other way at the moment. I couldn't think of... it's different if you're racing it and you were trying to, be a professional athlete and win at that thing. But once you're kind of beyond that, and I suppose for me it was like I'd had my time at the games and all that. Nowadays it's what interests me is these really unique opportunities, interesting things.
What's it like being part of the Red Bull setup? I think one of my favourite. He's not there. Excuse me, not there at the moment. But Daniel Ricciardo, being a Red Bull athlete, and looking through there today, you got Mick Fanning. Mark Matthews is another one that I find really interesting. He spoke at a corporate. What's it called?
You heard his fear speech.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, what was it? Conference. It was he spoke at our company conference. Just for where I work. Yeah, right. He came and spoke at our Schneider conference.
Yep.
And his story was amazing. And he's talking about, like, being nervous about public speaking, but he's surfed Shipsterns Bluff and the injuries that he's got and coming back, and then you got, like, Casey Stoner, Craig Lowndes, all, like, huge names, like, and every now and then it looks like you guys get to catch up. Like, what's it like being part of that setup and having access to those sorts of people?
It's like it sounds.
Yeah.
It's amazing. They provide, I suppose they're the one company that's provided the variance in athletes from different areas, and they're generally just there's a couple from different, like the same sport, but generally it's just from all these unique different sports. And you've probably mentioned the better known athletes, I suppose, or let's say the bigger sports that the public might know. But then if you go into, like, the other sports, say support things like hang gliding, BMX riding, even like nowadays the downhill mountain biking, canoeing. I was going base jumping,
a lot of the winter sports too.
All the winter sports, half pipe. So it's just such a range of sports. I mean, we've had rugby players that come in at stages. Now you've got Travis Boak in AFL and dabbling in AFL. So you got all these different athletes to draw on. I suppose if you, like, for me, it's always been about finding out what they do in their sport. So I probably spend a lot of time around the motorsports guys because they train very similar to us, which has always been interesting to, get involved or see what they do in their sports. But if you asked me 10 or 20 years ago, would you have those interactions and be around those people? It'd be a dream.
It's nothing else that sort of brings that diverse group of athletes together under one sort of banner.
Oh, well, that good example of that race you did a couple of times in Brisbane. Was that where that guy you ran? The guy had the hang glide off the statue and all this sort of.
Yeah, I mean they put on. Yeah, I mean probably it's what driven. Red Bull is what's driven me to go in that direction as well as finding interesting things, because they've always put me into or asked me to do interesting things as well. So the race Dane's talking about was called Giants of Rio, and literally I was the only Red Bull athlete in our team from Australia, but we literally, actually in the hang glider, Johnny Durand. And then Kai Hurst came and swam for us. We had a mountain biker who came over for us, and literally this race is in Rio. Kai swam out in the ocean, but in the middle of his swim, he's got off and done a cliff dive. Gets out, the mountain bikers rode up through the favelas. So a few days, the mountain bikers ridden up through the favelas. They've literally pulled guns out on them warming up the day before.
Wow.
And then they're racing up there. The hang glider was meant to go off up at Cristo at the statue, but the winds weren't perfect. But it literally he's gone off from the mountains, hang glided down, had to land on like one kind of spot, say target, 10 metres wide, like a target. Yeah. If he missed it, then I had to then go and run extra before I even started my run.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, to me, to finish, I had to run 20, literally, I think it was a half marathon in the soft sand along Copacabana Beach, and it was hell. But that's what they call me to do, I suppose.
And in amongst that group, do you think they're all really talented, or do you think they've all got that success mindset? Like trying to get back to that recipe for success. Like, do you see common traits amongst all those people?
Yes and no. The common traits are all driven people.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't keep going, getting up in sport and repeating what you do over and over and over again without being driven and wanting to do it. I think I do believe now, with a bit of hindsight, there's two types of athletes. There's those athletes who, they're purely only driven by competition and winning.
Yeah.
And I think majority of those, once they finish sport, they really finish sport, and you never see them again. Yeah. Because they didn't really have a love for sport. They had a love for winning, and they had a love, like, this competitiveness about them. Then you have the other side of sport, and I suppose it's where I fit and where I probably get along with guys and girls who are very similar to me, is we probably love sport and happen to be good at it. We're competitive because that was the nature of what it is, but we never stopped. So I don't really consider I've ever stopped and retired, because I've just found the next thing I want to do and the next thing I want to do, and try to do that at a reasonably high, at a high level.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad a little bit to see the guys who are so competitive and driven, like overly driven just to win. And you see it time and time again. Those ones, people who will just do anything to win, and as far as cheat even. But
anyone come to mind? It's all right. No one listens to this podcast.
I mean, people have come and gone. I mean, you know them because you'd never see them again after their time.
Yeah.
After, when they finish sport, they don't continue in sport. They'll completely go off in another direction. But for me, what the beauty of sport is, whether you're doing it competitively or at that level, or you've just grown up in the surf club your whole life and you just love sport, you've still got that, that's the bond. And that's what continue. You keep fit, number one, but it's all about, like, the friends you make through it and that. And that sounds like really corny, but it's true, because I know a lot of the people I kind of hang around or still do sport with, we all didn't start in the same sports. We cross over all the time, whether it's from surfing to running to surf lifesaving, now to cycling. So many people getting out mountain biking now. It's great because it's something I've been doing more on my own, and now we're starting to get everyone crossing over to that.
Cycling's another thing that seems to have exploded on the coast. Like, a lot of good cyclists here, or is that that was something someone asked me to ask today about what you thought of the local cycling scene on the coast.
Well, it's always been strong. Like, if you think of Robbie McEwen and all, the guys who rode the tour around his time, Nick Gaze, they all used to train here on the Gold Coast throughout summer. So, of course, they had to be in Europe for the rest of the year. But, Gold Coast has got the best terrain, some of the best cycling.
Gold Coast gets dismissed as just being the beach, but not far that way. There's some really nice hills and some great locations.
Man, you got Melbourne's probably the biggest in Australia cycling scene.
Yep.
And they've actually got the Dandenongs, and their climbs out there are nothing like we got here.
You'd have to go out to
from Melbourne. It's a fair ride to the Dandenongs, I'm guessing. I think it's about an hour to get there.
Yeah.
But here, 20 minutes from here, where we live, you're out Springbrook. You're out in the hill, half an hour.
Yeah.
Half an hour bike ride. You're out in 8-9 kilometre climbs.
Yeah. Plus now people know about the hinterland a bit more, the hiking and the running, and Gold Coast definitely not just the beaches, that's for sure. But I didn't know that as a kid either, till we started riding, really.
Who's the next big name to look at in an Australian triathlon?
Well, you probably better ask someone else than me. These days, I'm across so many different sports. I'll be completely frank, I don't watch a lot of triathlon. I kind of had a pretty clear cut.
I don't think there's anyone really setting the world on fire, is there?
No. I mean, you got some young guys. Matt Houser's obviously, super young and made the Commonwealth Games team and medal.
The Tasmanian.
Jake Birthwhistle.
Yeah, he's probably the... but
triathlon's a really unique sport. And again, with hindsight, you kind of realise there's so many different sports within triathlon that it's hard to keep up because you have the guys racing for the Olympic Games, and a lot of that now happens overseas. So you don't often see them racing here. So unless you're really following it each weekend, and that's what your sport of choice, you don't know where they're racing overseas. And then Ironman's obviously the biggest event.
Yeah.
And as far as mainstream goes, that's the one. But it's Hawaii Ironman, right? It's still the focus is always America or overseas.
Yeah.
So as an Aussie, it's unless you're week in, week out doing it, it is quite hard to kind of keep tabs on it. But these days, I mean, with what I do, like more day to day, I'm across so many different sports now that I have an interest in a whole range of things, and it's people you kind of hang out with in the sport you follow, like you would.
Yep.
The people you know are the people you follow, right? So unless you've got a mate or someone who's actually in that area, it's harder to follow.
Something I found interesting going over the Noosa results was that the times aren't any quicker now than when they were in the 90s. And I don't know whether that's a course change or I just thought that maybe with like technology, the bike leg would be that much quicker or
EPO,
things like that. But
EPO. all those
allegedly
guys in the 90s, early 2000s, I want it. No, you would think it'd be faster.
Oh, yeah, I just would have thought that you'd see a progressive gain on the time like you do a lot of sports, but the times for the last couple of years weren't any quicker than what the guys would.
The girls are.
Yeah, right.
Faster, aren't they?
Girls are probably going faster, yeah. Oh, the guy, I mean, triathlon, it's how you race it, right? You can go hard out of the swim and bike and run. I think these days it's more tactical around Noosa for the guys because it's all technology has helped, but it's also probably slowed down the race in the fact that they get in packs and no one wants to do the leading or whatever. But then the course, it's not a problem, but what has happened with Noosa is the numbers have grown. As the numbers have grown, they've had to extend the course. So you've got to run further through transition, for example.
Okay.
Because they've allowed greater numbers in the transition. They've had to change the flow, and now they swim it. Yeah.
Literally more bikes to put on the rack and all that sort of thing.
So the swim's now in the ocean instead of the river.
So can't really gauge the distance that well. Yeah. That might be a factor, but
fair enough.
I don't know.
They'd have to be going quicker. I mean, the sport...
I don't think they're running any quicker than you guys did. Like local... Noosa's still a pretty local...
Yeah.
It used to be quite international from when you were doing it. It seems more local now as far as the top guys are concerned.
Yeah. Definitely at the international level. I mean, what's happening now in like the Olympic Games competition.
Yeah.
They're on under 30 pretty regularly.
Yeah, and I mean, because of, again, just the way sports change, is getting to now start to get a sneak peek into what the younger guys are doing in their sessions and the times they're, like, these are triathletes and the times they're running in training off the bike or for, 3K run time trials and this. It's like,
What would it have done to you if you were prepping for London or Beijing and what we've just had happen globally happens and they push the Olympics back 12 months? What does that do to you?
I don't know what it'd do to you around the Olympics, but it would have been devastating, mate, as sport. Like if your only thing is racing a sport, which mine was 10 years ago, like my whole life was revolved. We were in this bubble. My whole life revolved around triathlon, training, eating, sleeping, racing, where you travelled, my family, everything.
Yeah.
Your whole life gets taken away from you. But in saying that, there's a lot of other industries that exactly the same things happen. It's not just sport. But what amazes me more is like a whole. It's a sport across the whole board. The fact it got completely shut down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I never thought I'd see.
Well, it's not been seen since
World
War II.
Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
even some sports went through the wars.
Yeah.
None have gone through. Horse racing. It's about the only thing.
Horse racing, yeah.
Australia's second biggest industry, the third biggest industry.
The Olympics and all that missed the wars, but sort of sport was still
Not many. There's only been like 2 Olympics missed since 1896.
Yeah, but
like
you can think even like movies in America, they're still playing like local baseball,
Yeah,
like sport. Like you,
true.
Well, you could still go
would
and
have been still playing AFL during the wars here, like the VFL, whatever.
Cricket.
At the time, cricket.
Yeah.
But this has been unprecedented, surely.
I just never like. It's just crazy to think when you look at it and think it just shut down for that amount of time and people couldn't touch each other.
What could have happened if that NBA player didn't lick all the microphones? Like, it was a real house of cards after that happened.
Well, what do you reckon? Off topic. Footy starting.
I do
this
the
week.
questions, Dane.
Yeah, I know. Footy starting this week.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
They can tackle, sweating all over each other.
Yeah,
but cricket's coming back, and they're not allowed to
lick the ball.
Well, not lick the ball, but not allowed to celebrate a wicket by having a,
That's to stop Faf to putting his lollies on the ball. I think.
Oh, you can't give your hat to the umpire.
Tell you what, mate. School pickup was chaos this afternoon.
Wasn't it?
Don't worry about tackling each other in scrums. I guess the point is that they're all tested. I don't know. By the time cricket starts, it could be either a non-event or we've had wave 2 and cricket's cancelled for the year. But
I mean, it's looking promising here in Australia, right? But what is of more interest, I suppose, from an elite sport perspective, is international travel is not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
So it's great having Australian sport back on and, country-specific competition, but any sport that relies on an international competition, so if you think of like world surfing, if you think of Olympics, if you think of any sport that's of that level, tennis, I mean...
Formula One, golf,
anything, you
can't
virtually travel. And there's obviously going to be, reasonable risk for a long time.
They're talking about, I think it was... don't quote me, but I think McLaren, someone was telling me on the weekend, McLaren are looking to have to sell some of their old, collectible race cars that they've got in their workshop just to pump the funding up.
Yep. Well, let's hope it all gets back.
Hey,
for everyone.
You've been a really good guest, but I've got 3 questions that I always try and finish on for. I was supposed to word you up before we started, but I forgot. But it's sort of like a rapid fire. So here we go. Favourite place in the world for a beer?
North Burleigh Surf Club.
The schooners taste best at North Burleigh. Favourite athlete of all time? It doesn't have to be the best, but your favourite athlete of all the time.
I actually don't have an answer for that. No. I really, really do not have an answer for that.
No good.
That's
the first strikeout we've had, actually.
I do not have an answer for it. You know what? Because... I just don't have an answer for it. It changes with what I'm interested in.
I don't know. Do you know Cliffy Rod from North Burleigh?
Yeah,
he came on the pod and he had about 15 people he rattled off.
Oh, really?
Well, that's what Courtney's saying. It changes.
It changes. Depends.
He
on
was
what
the same.
When you're a kid, you love.
I think you were one of his, actually. One of the names he rattled
Brad
off.
Bevan was my, as childhood,
if you
just wanted to emulate Brad, and that's how I kind of went into what I did in triathlon.
If you got an animal for your nickname, so like the shark, Greg Norman, Tiger Woods, obviously, the croc, he's in elite company there for athletes. Yeah. All right, last one. If you could have any 4 people over for a barbecue and some beers, who's coming and what are you cooking?
Oh God, these kinds of questions.
It's cliche, but it's one of my faves. Get some good answers.
Who would I have for a barbecue? The honest answer is that I think of 4 people that would least stress my brain to think about it at the moment. Dane, my wife.
Oh, nice.
My kids. There you go, 4. Nah,
very good.
I'm not. I'm taking the piss a little bit out of you, but mate. Honestly, I get to meet some pretty interesting people in everyday life.
It's just standard. It's just a standard Saturday.
No, it's definitely not standard Saturday, but I never really think too much about questions or what's the best and what's this because mate, I'm always.
That's the problem. When you're one of them,
definitely not.
Don't have any heroes.
He lies awake thinking about what he's going to do the next day to improve, and I'm lying there thinking about questions I can ask.
It'd be interesting to ask, say, Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods that who would you have over, and they'd be like, well, No one.
Honest,
I don't know if
I
you're right.
don't like people. I used to hang out with these security guards.
But like honest answer is, if you said to me like, who would I want to have over for dinner or whatever, my probably preference would be to get like mates I haven't seen in a while and have a beer and have dinner, because that's something like Dane was like probably back me up here. It's something that probably I do miss out on a little bit because I'm
never at
home.
It's certainly something I've missed. You know, when people talk about, the pub, I need to get back to the pub. The only thing I've really missed is that having like another family over for a barbecue on the weekend.
That's it.
The pub, I'll enjoy it when I get there, but I'm not busting to go to a restaurant or something like that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Where can our listeners find you online? Follow?
Generally tagged under Mr. Courtney Atkinson because of the name, to try and avert any, blame my parents a little bit for but avert things. So Mr. Courtney Atkinson across most channels.
We've got a couple of things for you. Got a 6-pack of Goldies for you.
Oh, mate. I'll tell a quick story about Courtney and gold. I don't know if you'll ever remember.
Hang on. 6-pack of gold.
I reckon I know the story because Timmy Walker would never let me live this down.
I've got a Beers and Banter hat for you there.
Oh, sweet.
And the guys at Group Star Socks sent over a pair of socks.
Nice.
They're looking after us at the moment. So they're all yours. Now I want to hear this Forest Gold story.
Well, when we were younger, we were going out night clubbing. And we were at Billy's probably, where all the surf club people hung. And we had a mate, he's a TSS boy, lifeguard, Marshall Keane, who was a host at the Berlin bar, which was, do you remember that?
I remember Melbourne's. I remember being in Melbourne's when I was about 16 after Aussies.
The bar was like down this alleyway. It was like a bit of a...
You should know someone,
secret.
line up.
It was real sort of...
Wasn't our gig,
nightclubby like type of thing. So we all went there and Marshall got us in for free, took us to the bar and said, give these guys whatever they want to drink. And we're like, giddy up. Vodkas, bourbons, all these spirits. It gets to Courtney, goes, 4X gold.
I love it.
The barman just went, okay. I think we got them somewhere in the back of the fridge.
Gold's come back in. It went out there for a while.
Yeah, Courtney's been on it for
Milton Mango.
Milton Mango's come back in. I was crossing over. We're on the ferry going over to Tassie, and thinking of all places to get one, and of course, in the ferry going, what is it? What's the ferry called to go over to Tassie? Spirit of Tasmania.
Yeah,
mate, stock and gold. Even down
I'm
there.
starting to get back on the gold because I can't handle the
full strength.
That's the killer with some of these craft beers is that I've drunk gold most of my adult life, and then I've tried to just broaden my horizons and try all these different beers, but they send you for sick. Some of them,
craft ones are stronger than heavies, aren't they?
Yeah,
some of them.
Yeah, some of them really knock your socks off. On that note, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you all again soon. Cheers. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Dane.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Dane.